Hi, and welcome to Brick School. This is class 2. What are frameworks and why use them? Now, it seems like a pretty easy question. What are frameworks? And well, they are basically nothing more than a way for you to have a bunch of preset things that you can use. So, in other words, you've got font sizes, you have paddings, radiuses, all these things. Instead of actually putting a value on them where we're saying, okay, we want our padding to be 10 pixels or 1 rem or whatever unit, we use a variable. And a variable is simply something in place of. Typically, these variables are pretty easy to understand. You may have something like dash dash text dash M, which says that's your text size and it's size medium. And of course, you'd have text dash L as large. So we're going to take a look at each of the main frameworks. However, I need you to understand that they basically are all doing the exact same thing. One is not really better than the other. Almost all frameworks are plugins that are installed, and that's the one thing I really don't like. In fact, I built Brickstyler for that exact reason. I wanted the power of a framework, but I didn't want yet another bloody thing installed on my WordPress site. So let's take a look at the different frameworks and you'll kind of understand how they work. Most of them are kind of the same. In fact, they're all basically the same, but this way you can kind of see how they work. So the first I'll start out with is maybe a little long in the tooth one, but ACSS, which was kind of the first framework that came to Bricks. And it works basically, you're going to select an item. And here I can right click and I can say, okay, well, I want text XL or I want it to be XS. You know, it's a straightforward thing. Also, when you do your colors, you can right click, you get this kind of menu. There's some good about this. There's some, it can be rather tricky to hit. You gotta use your control button to get to these sub menus, and it's a little clunky, but it works and a lot of people use it. And at the end of the day, always use what you have. That's my biggest advice. Use what you have or use what you like. So that's ACSS. The reason I personally stopped using it, this thing here with it just forever gets in my way. And when you view it on the front end and you're control seeing, and the idea is that you can on the front end change your settings, like let's say, oh, you want to change your base size, your font, you can do so. Well, that's not something you should be doing after your site has begun to be built. You can tweak it should you need, but don't sit there with a slider or a thing and just change your fonts kind of willy-nilly kind of thing and based on your need at the time. You should always have a preset. Okay, this is kind of where we're going with it. So that's ACSS. This video is sponsored by bricksfx. bricksfx adds simple animations to your page in seconds. Here we have a simple page, and to add animations to it, all we have to do is go to our wrapper. On the load, let's have this one slide in from the right. Let's have these cards here. We'll just select the card wrapper and let's put a scroll effect on that. So we'll go under scroll, rotate right, and blur soft. And now when we load our page, we have an animation here and we have this nice scroll effect coming in. For more information, check out bricksfx.io. Next up, we will take a look at Core. Core is a very popular framework right now. I use it myself on some sites. I've started using Brickstyler now, more so than Core, but basically works pretty much the same way. You're going to select something, and let's say you want to set your font size. You're going to right click. their little pop-up menu comes up here. Same difference where you can kind of preview it. You can select your text. The colors, they have this kind of pop-up. I've played with their color picker and changed the CSS a little to make it more usable. It's all right. It's not great. It's all right. The big thing is in 2.0, here I'm right clicking and it brings up this menu. But if I just left click, I can just see the color picker. And to be honest, it's gotten so much better in 2.0 that I don't personally think that anybody's is better than just the built-in bricks one now. So that's basically how it works. And you'll notice with these colors, you'll see that there's primary 50, primary 40. And what that's saying is those are transparencies of that color. So, it looks like you have a ton of color here, but you can actually kind of quickly see like, okay, here's my darks. And then, vice versa, here's my lights and that kind of thing. And this is a secondary color. So it may look like a lot, but it actually isn't. You're pretty quickly able to go in and see what you want. And then lastly, I will show is Brick Styler. This one uses total native bricks. There's no pop-up windows because nothing's installed. It's really just a set of variables. So it allows me to come in and let's say I want to hit my mic there. Let's say I want to set my font size. I'll just click my variables. I'll go down to my fonts and I'll say, okay, I want text XL. Or if I want to have, let's say, text 3XL, whatever. And then for the colors, it's using the same process as Core. I kind of roughly based it off of that. However, you can have more steps. So here, I have 9 levels of dark. I probably don't need that, but I did it more as an example, and 9 levels of light. So, you're able to really tune in to what it is you want. And if you look at the borders, let's say you go to your border and you're trying to round this. Actually, what I'll do is I'll give this a background color real fast. We'll give it that. This is going to look awful. We'll do the padding. We'll just give it, I don't know, space M. And let's go to our border and we're going to round something. And we'll just take a radius XL and we'll put it on all the corners. So as you saw, I just did a bunch of stylings, but there's going to be consistency throughout the website. Anywhere that I put radius XL, it will have that exact amount of radius to it. Anywhere that I put the padding of space M, the medium padding, and if I come back and I go, I don't really like that. Let's go ahead and change that to, I don't know, XS because we want it extra small. And there you go. Now everything's extra small. But you don't have to worry about numbers. You don't have to worry about the consistency. Now, the reason I showed you all three is to show you that while the actual way you go to use it is slightly different, they all end in the exact same power. By using a variable, you're able to say, okay, there's this amount of padding, and that padding, you can change it and it'll rifle through your whole site, as opposed to having little unit values of, let's say if I had put, I don't know, 1 rem here, and then I'd have to remember, well, what was the value I used on that other page? So by just having small, medium, large, and to be very honest, I would say 80 to 90% of your stuff is going to be in that medium, whatever your base is. So you find that a lot of this is about having that consistency, and it speeds up your design time by a 3-fold at least. I encourage you to actually look at what the naming is. And that's why if you look at something like automatic CSS, for instance, let's go ahead and I will put some blocks in here. And for this one block, let's go ahead and make it a grid. And if I right click on my grid, there you have this great thing, grid 3. And that gives you a 3 grid. It's all right, but I'm not a big fan of it. Now, if you look at somebody like Core, um, when they do their grid, you can actually go in and let's say grid, and same kind of idea, 2 or 3 or 4, but they use the actual code. And I think that is far better, because while this code may seem complicated the first time you use it, it's better for you to learn what the actual code is. I mean, here you can see it. It's saying I'm going to repeat 3 times a min max of 0 to 1 frame. So in other words, it's going to do 1 frame, 1 frame, 1 frame, and boom, it's done. Now, some of you automatic CSS people may be saying, oh, well, yeah, but back in automatic CSS, it auto put in the gap here for me, and I didn't have to do that on Core. Or I should say, I have to do that myself on Core. Well, that is true, but let's time it. Oh, that took a half a second. And there are a lot of times where I don't want a gap. And now back here, I have to actually go and imply the specifically state the gap anyway. Therefore, you didn't save me any time. So by just not having it, I kind of preferred that way. And obviously with brickstyler, it's the same way, where it's not implied. You actually go in and choose it, which once again takes all of about half a second. So now you can kind of see why a framework is so important and why it's the second video in this series. Because everything I want to teach is based off the idea of using a framework. For the most part, I don't know too many people that use bricks that don't use a framework at all, because it's just not smart working habits. I mean, even on a 1-2 page site, all your sizing, your spacing, your padding, the width of your site, all of these things are decided in your framework. Now, this wasn't a full-on in-depth tutorial on frameworks. It was more just a video to teach you what a framework is. It is nothing more than a collection of values that you have predetermined that sets up your site. And in fact, if we go to brickstyler and we create a site profile here, you can actually see the things that you sort of decide when you're setting up. And it doesn't matter if it's brickstyler or ACSS or ATF, they all have kind of the same thing. This is just one visual that you can see it all in one. So basically, the main key thing is your root size, whether or not you want to have 62 or 100%. And basically what that is, we've adjusted the font, the root size of the font to 62%, so that one rem equals 10 pixels as opposed to 13 pixels, which one rem should equal. So basically, almost across the board, and bricks by default sits at 62.5, so that one rem is a pixel. Or I should say one rem is 10 pixels. Makes the math easier. Then this here is the spacing differences, so it's basically, if you look at this, say a major third, so it's going to take whatever value you have and go up 1.25 to the next size, and so on and so on. And that's how it decides the step value. So if you have, let's say you go with something like an octave, it literally would double each time, and your steps would be huge. So you'd have a little font would be your base font, and then the next one would be literally twice as big, and then the next one from that would be twice as big. So that's what size scale means. And therefore, I don't know why they put the musical terminology in with, the major third, the perfect fourth, all that. Long story short, just look at the number and you'll kind of be able to say, okay, so this is going to add about a quarter to each step. Perfect fifth, it's going to take this size and then add about 50%, and you get your scaling. So, by the way, I personally actually use about perfect fourth, or, sometimes augmented fourth. But anyway, these here I basically leave, except for I use a big monitor. I like to use 20 on as my root base font size. This here is the width of your viewport. So, on a small viewport, this is the smallest it goes, and the biggest it goes, which is basically your site width. So a lot of people would do 1366, for instance, and that would be the width of your container. Okay, and then the rest are colors, which again, that is part of your framework, is having your colors. And note that, with Brick Styler, I force people to have their main color called primary, because I think that it's really good practice, and you should really do that. You don't want to use names. So in other words, I don't want to call this, I don't know, pink, and then I'm going to go find a nice pink here. Okay, whatever. Let's say that that's pink. So I don't want to call my color by the name. The reason being is, how many times have you had it where a client comes back and says, oh, yeah, that pink, turns out it's not a good color for us. We want to change it to green. Okay, so you come in your settings and you change it to green, but all of your code said pink. And that's why you would much better off calling this secondary or tertiary or whatever, accent. There's lots of names that people use. You can kind of make up whatever you want. But for the most part, primary, secondary, and tertiary is sort of the standard. So that's what goes into building a framework, or I should say all the settings that actually make up the framework, and each one does it a little differently. With automatic CSS, you actually enter it in here through different settings here. So here's your content width and your mobile, that kind of thing. So pick a framework, one that works for you. None are really better than the other. They're all pretty much interchangeable. Brick Styler comes with this course for free, so that's great. If you already own ACSS, or you like using it, or ATF or Core, great. Use those. I'll be showing the course using Brick Styler because it's free and it's not a plugin. And anytime you can get away with not using a plugin, I want you to go that route. Whenever it is, try not to use plugins, all right? So anyway, hope this gives you some clarity and gets you excited about using frameworks. In the next video, we're actually going to put that framework to use.